Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Unfiltered. My name is Ridi Klabi. Thank you for joining us. So, what are we doing tonight? The Democratic Alliance's head of policy has resigned. Any other year, her departure would not be that significant. But hey, this is an election year, and I bet you manifestos of different parties are probably at the printing press as we speak. Yet, here's the Democratic Alliance, I think, scoring own goals and not showing decisive, confident planning. What are the DA's policies, and do they speak to the lived experiences of the black people the party wishes to attract? Of course, they will say they want votes from all South Africans, but the fact of the matter is that the Democratic Alliance can only grow by attracting more of the black electorate, the black vote. So, on the one hand, the party has a very soft spot for investors, we know that, who are not particularly crazy about social grants, the national health insurance, land restitution, and yet these are interventions that do take into account our inequality. Now, we can argue about the detail of delivering the NHI, restitution, free education, etc. But is there an argument about whether or not South Africa, as the most unequal country in the world, simply needs these programs for the bottom 60% of its citizens who, listen to this is important, the bottom 60% who only control 7% of the country's assets? You don't believe me? Check out the World Bank's report, which confirmed an earlier Oxfam report. The bitter truth, dear South Africa, is that we are the most unequal country in the world. What that means is that the top 1% of South Africans own 70% of the country's wealth. Do you know what the DA's policies are to tackle this mammoth problems? Is the DA capable of doing that? Tonight on Unfiltered, I am joined by none other than DA leader Mmusi Maimane. It's great to have you with us.
Good evening, Ridi. Good evening, fellow South Africans. It's great to be here.
Thank you very much for making time, particularly because you've been on the campaign trail. So let's get on with it. Your head of policy has resigned, and she cites several reasons: that you're not serious about policy, that you're focusing on billboards. She cites other reasons. You recruited her to head the policy unit, but you didn't capacitate her. She's got a staff of 3 capable young people, but this is their first real job. They've just left university. Is it true you're not serious about policy?
I think, first of all, as a party that's been in government, we govern for 16 million South Africans. We administer a budget of 160 billion rands. Our intention is to govern South Africa. It would be almost anomalous that a party of that nature would not take policy seriously. Secondly, we've been able to historically develop policies that appeal to how we govern, what we do, and frankly, where we govern, unemployment is on the decline. We demonstrate that we deliver policies because we've got that policy outlook that puts it forward. In a contested terrain, and I love the points that you raise about the complexity of our society, the inequality, that is going to be a contested space. And as South Africans, as a party that represents all South Africans from all races, these are matters that are going to be debated. And I think an iterative process is on the go, and we've been successful at writing policy up to this point. It's not to suggest by any matter of means the party doesn't have policy. It is now at a point where it's been expressed in the manifesto. So I'm quite comfortable that we'll come up with innovative views that say, how do we address the challenges of South Africa, and how do we focus on leading this one South Africa for all, this country that we can include more people into our economy and build a South Africa where we don't have those distinctions that you've just described.
Let's talk about policy, particularly on BEE. Why have you not corrected the perception and the current argument that Gwen's resignation is reflective of the contestation between the Liberals and the Conservatives in the DA, that it is about factionalism in the Democratic Alliance, that it is about a Gwen Ngwenya BEE policy versus a Mmusi Maimane BEE policy? The fact of the matter is that your Federal Council last year, July, decided on a triple BEE policy that is not race-based, and she was tasked with going on and developing that particular policy. True or false?
That's inaccurate. Firstly, let me just say, when you look at the DA's constitution itself, it cites that in its opening stance that there are 4 values that unite every DA member. It's about freedom, it's about fairness, opportunity, and diversity. On the diversity clause, there's an explicit acknowledgement of the fact that we have a history of injustice that was born out of race. on the fairness discussion, there's a clear explicit nature that says South Africa is unequal on the basis of race. That's a function of our past. You could then not write policies that depart from those two founding principles. You'd have to write with a view that says, how do we address this inequality that we've inherited, coupled with the fact that about a future we want to build? Now, what has happened in South Africa in the last perhaps maybe 20 years is that we've introduced a policy platform that puts race only at the center of ownership rather than at other developmental indicators. Mm-hmm. And that's been the ANC's triple BEE model that has ultimately meant that there's an elitism that is developed. Mm-hmm. We reject that model. Our model rather says that let's recognize that race is still, in this instance, a proxy for disadvantage. Let's build a model that says, how do we broaden inclusion? So rather than narrowly say, let's give share ownership to Musi Maimane in this mine so that we can say we're BEE compliant, why don't we take the same shares and make the employees shareholders?
That sounds reasonable, but let's just be factual here and look at the chronology of events. Yeah. After July last year, when the Federal Council made a pronouncement on this matter, you wrote in Bukamuse as well that we need to move away from a race-based triple BEE policy. But further than that, your senior party members were contradicting each other on Twitter. That's one thing you have in common with the ANC, I might suggest. You had Phumzile van Dam saying that we have not abandoned broad-based black economic empowerment. We're not moving away from a race-based concept thereof. Mike Waters followed up with another, and this is on social media, saying, yes, we have. So where does the DA stand on this?
It's members and South Africans are able to debate this matter.
But come on, those are senior party members. They're not debating. They're disagreeing with each other on a social platform. Did you or did you not jettison a race-based empowerment program?
We have stated categorically. That's why I say, let's depart from the constitution of the DA. Let's not debate what the nuances. The constitution acknowledges that. And furthermore from that, of course... Are
you not worried when your senior members don't understand that? Or one who's very senior, particularly in Parliament, says, yes, we have, and here you are today saying, no, we haven't?
What I want to do in the long run is that ultimately, really, we start with the premise that says race still is a proxy for disadvantage. Over a long period of time, I don't want to be living in a country where it still remains the case, surely. Mm-hmm. Whether we like it or not, the long-term future of our country must be one where we talk a non-racialism that acknowledges our diversity in different races.
But even on
doesn't
diversity,
depend on the economic model that simply says that over a long period. Otherwise, we have not succeeded.
But did the rest of your party leadership believe what you've just said? Do they agree with you? Is this still a fight that you're fighting within your ranks?
Not at all. I think the Federal Executive issued a very strong statement acknowledging this view, supporting that view, that we accept historical injustice that's born out of race. We want to reject the ANC's model of triple BEE as it's been conceptualized by the ANC. We want to build a model that is inclusive to more South Africans, particularly black South Africans, and that over a long period of time, the success of that model ought to be tested on the fact that our society becomes a non-racial.
So your empowerment program is race-based. We're not debating the way the ANC, the way it has unfolded with people who have proximity to political power benefiting. I think any reasonable South African would reject that. So let's not even debate that it's a waste of time. What I want to know is that the DA is offering on the table to its constituency, to the 52% youth that are unemployed, to the 50% unemployed people who have never even worked a day in their life. What are you saying in plain, simple English? In
plain, simple English, we recognize that we've got to build an economy that includes those South Africans. Many of those South Africans are left out because the color of their skin. Many of them is because the history of our country has put them in places where they can't access opportunities, in rural communities, in outskirts. I want to build an economy that is growing, that can create work for South Africans to work, to have a job in every home. And ultimately, furthermore, we can address this racial inequality by putting a policy on the table that acknowledges that, but over the long period of time says to ourselves, we'll depart from that.
We'll talk about inequality in the next segment, but if you're so serious about policy, why did you not empower your policy unit, particularly because you personally recruited Gwen Ngwenya? You didn't send some minions or some low-ranking officials. You brought her into that position.
That's a very powerful statement right there. If I didn't believe in the importance of policy, I would not have recruited her.
But then you didn't support her. You recruited her, but you don't support her. That's what I'm asking you.
That's also not accurate. what is accurate is the fact that I recruited someone who I thought could add a contribution to our party. She came into an organization that already had professional staff that are working on it.
But the policy unit?
This is the policy unit. We were right in the midst of appointing a director of policy. We had to wait for another process to unfold. And furthermore,
what other process? Come on. Why are you speaking in cryptic tones?
I'm not speaking in cryptic tones. There were multiple candidates because actually policy in this instance needs to be a very strong professional job. You can appreciate that.
But that's exactly what she says, that she needed professionals and you capacitated her with people who are fresh from university. No disrespect to them, and we must empower new graduates. But if you're that serious about policy, surely it's a federal council, yes, but the head of policy attends federal council meetings. She needs to have the staff that can deliver on these things.
Absolutely. And you can recall that she's only been in the job for less than 11 months. In the midst of all of that, the interview process took place. Where the delay was, one of the candidates is undergoing a list process, so that will be finalized
So you were
soon.
in the process of capacitating?
It's all been done, and it doesn't mean that hampered the issue, because policy cannot be located just in one individual. Gwene Ngwenya was also an MP. I've got a number of talented MPs that have made significant contributions.
But they're not head of policy.
It's also a misnomer to suggest the fact that at our last federal council, right here, we agreed on a number of policies. So there are a number of issues that were already delivered upon. In the same capacity, in the same space. And the Federal Council before that had also agreed on a number of issues. So I think the conversation about capacity, look, we're a political party. We're not just a think tank. We're a political party. There's capacity built on there. And we're offering an alternative to South Africans.
We'll talk about that alternative in just a moment and also expand on the inequality theme because I think it is very, very important. Do stay with us.
SABC 1 brings you Verified, a new entertainment reality show that certifies you're cool.
This is a sketch show, and I've got the best sketches.
Ask him so we can tell you.
It's the battle on who's the most funniest. The fight for the votes. It's the ultimate clash of the video clips.
Weekend young boy, make it top boy.
Crazy audience, 4 rounds, 8 clips, and 2 contenders.
Shot better, shot better. Shot better.
Watch as our online content creators get verified every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Right here on SABC 1. Mzansi for sure. Spetesh Shisa.
We are outside Liar School, Swaziareneke, where members are picketing against a picture that went viral.
What else do you want to see happen in a country?
Peace, security, and respect of human rights.
It's a bit nervous because it's a new start, it's a new environment.
I'm looking forward to learning new things.
Being a part of the SABC News team essentially means that I have to report news in an independent and impartial manner, making it a point that South Africans get a sense of what is happening in the country, the continent, and the world. I'm Abongile Dumago, and I'm SABC News.
Hello everyone, welcome back. You are watching Unfiltered with me, Ridi Tlabi, and of course my guest is Mmusi Maimane, who is the leader of the Democratic Alliance. With the resignation of the head of policy, we thought this is an opportunity to get to know the Democratic Alliance. And we're asking you, do you think the Democratic Alliance is the answer to our problems? Are they ready, fit to govern? Does their message, whatever it is, resonate with you? Okay, so one of the other areas that demonstrate perhaps a discomfort with certain issues, the national minimum wage. You say that the reason you oppose it is there's no opting out a clause that a young person will continuously be, or a South African will continuously be earning that minimum wage. But is that an honest reason you object to it? Isn't it true that you'd rather the sector, the market, decides what a minimum wage is? And if that is the case, surely that shows a lack of appreciation for our historical reality. We don't live in the country where the corporate sector or business has clothed or covered itself in glory when it comes to paying workers a fair wage.
Really, I think we must get a proper diagnosis of what exacerbates inequality. Inequality is exacerbated first and foremost by high levels of unemployment. The fact of the matter is, we've got the highest unemployment in the world. 4 out of 10 adults don't work. That exacerbates the issue. And so the first step in addressing inequality is making sure South Africans can work. Our median wage in this country is set at 3,500 rands. Our minimum wage is being set at 80% of the median wage, which puts it at just over 3,000 rands. What that, first of all, means is that it is the highest level in comparison to any OECD country. So this social experiment, which Treasury has already put on the table, this is not me saying it, it's President Ramaphosa's own department, saying you are bound to add to the list of the unemployment an additional 700,000 people within the next year. Secondly, that if we want to stimulate micro-enterprise, already our labor regulation is cumbersome. You add minimum wage, noting the first premise which I've just given you, which is as it's compared to the median wage, you are going to ensure that more and more people cannot get into the job market. So for me, yes, of course, I want more people to earn more money. Of course we do. All of us would agree on that. But what is the first principal issue is that it is more important for us to get people working. That's the most crucial issue. Because a young person who's at home not working is certainly, A, is robbed of dignity, B, is robbed of sustainable income. And thirdly, if we're going to address inequality, surely our starting point is to get more people working.
Look, the fact of the matter, though, is that the minimum wage is meant to address a specific and historic problem. Because even if you have people working, and I agree with you, we need to get young people working, unemployment, joblessness, low growth, they are all related to inequality, but inequality speaks of something else. It is about the demographics, the quality of work, and the type of works that are reserved for certain members of the population. And it is meant to protect those people. And Musi, respectfully, we have practice in this country. We have a history and a lived experience, and you can't just ignore that. And lived experience says, giving the market the responsibility to determine A, B, C, working conditions, and so on, the social impact with the community has not worked. It hasn't led to the trickle-down effect. And an example in point would be the mining industry. So,
Ridi, I can give you multiple examples. I can take you to the agricultural sector, which presents us the best opportunity for us to create work. I want 1 million jobs to come out of that sector. You go to Danone, where we had a sectorally determined minimum wage. Its effect has meant that the actual minimum wage in this country is 0. Its effect has meant that more people has lost work as an outcome of that.
Is that an inevitability, though, or is that something that those who have power, those who make decisions, use it to blackmail government and to crack the whip on workers?
Our history dictates.
I'm skeptical of that.
Our history dictates, and I'll share other sectors. Our history dictates the fact that, of course, our inequality, much of it is on racial lines. But the study we have not done is the intra-inequality amongst even one race. So if you took just black South Africans, the difficulty we've got is the skewed distribution of wage between the high earners and those who don't work, as exacerbated by the fact that there's inequality. So what I'm trying to get at is that let's get more people working. That must be our first priority.
At whatever wage, at whatever working conditions.
Let's give young people the option to be able to say, I'm choosing to opt out of here. Not just on the basis of wage. I think we must go even further. What are the other opt-out clauses that we could give citizens to be able to participate? In fact, this was one of the conversations that we're having, is to say, if a young woman wants to come in and work, and say, there are certain clauses here that I'm willing to exempt myself out of. Because as a party, we favor the right for people to choose. Let them be able to choose. State intervention says that we'll ultimately be able to regulate labour regulations.
State intervention with limits, you make it look as if it's a free-for-all, it's an extreme case of state intervention. It is surely an intervention that takes into account our historical past, that takes into account the fact that business has much to answer for this very inequality that you and I are talking about. That surely needs to be reflected in your message.
It is. And actually, the greatest challenge is that we're living in a country right now today where it's 2 South Africas. Only 4 out of 10 adults work, and the other 4 out of 10 adults don't work. The other 2 are discouraged work seekers. The fundamental issue is that minimum wage is President Ramaphosa's new wall. It's going to create a barrier upon which those who are on the outside aren't going to be able to get into the workspace. Our research indicates that when somebody enters the space of work, their probability of being able to find further levels of employment increases significantly.
Okay, just hold that thought. We are running out of time. Just hold that thought. I'm going to let you finish it in just a moment. Get your thoughts in, get your tweets in. We'll conclude this conversation around inequality and, of course, talk about land as well, that big issue. Stay with us.
Being a part of the SABC News team essentially means that I have to report news in an independent and impartial manner, making it a point that South Africans get a sense of what is happening in the country, the continent and the world. I'm Abongile Dumago and I'm SABC News.
We are outside Liar School, Swaziareneke, where members are picketing against a picture that went viral.
What else do you want to see happen in a country?
Peace, security, and respect of human rights.
It's a bit nervous because it's a new start, it's a new environment.
I'm looking forward to learning new things.
The attackers are still holed up inside the 14 Riverside Drive, and police are trying to pursue them.
The police and the Shabab are shooting. We were 15 persons in one room.
We suspect could be a terror attack.
14 innocent lives were lost through the hands of these murderous terrorists, with others injured. The security operation at Dusit Complex is over and all the terrorists eliminated.
The government having called off operations at the scene of the attack. Sarah Kimani, SABC News in Nairobi, Kenya.
All right, we are about to wrap up our conversation with the DA leader, Mmusi Maimane. Just a couple of things that we need to ask him very quickly before we wrap up. On land, you saying that restitution, not expropriation without compensation, and restitution must work for all. Isn't that the kind of wishy-washy, sitting on the fence, DA type of message? That obviously it's not going to work for all in that perfect sense, because those who are owners of land will have to give something, will have to lose something so that the landless can be accommodated. What do you mean by it?
You don't need to amend the Constitution to achieve that. You need the political will, the financial resources, and ultimately a capable state to be able to deliver on that. The removal of compensation...
But working for all, in what way? What do you mean for all?
The removal of compensation isn't suddenly going to give land to all. All it will end up doing is give land to those who are politically connected at the elite. Venezuela, Zimbabwe tried both policies, and we can tell where both those countries have ended up. If you want it for all, you want for every South African, particularly in every home, to be able to have title to land, because when they do that, you can then be able to use the value to escalate it over a long period of time. Apartheid was a systemic disruption of wealth transfer, and wealth transfer is an asset that is in land owned by the individual. So you need the political will to be able to get
Should
there.
we trust the DA, though, when it comes to land and social housing issues? If you take the Tafelberg matter that had to be stopped by the High Court, there are those Bromwell evictions that we are talking about. And I can cite a couple of things, especially in the Western Cape. Why should we trust you?
I think we mustn't conflate multiple different issues. The most important question that we must put is we're talking about title to South Africans. I can tell you right now, in Johannesburg, we've issued more title than the previous administration has been able to do so. Furthermore, even in council-owned property, we've developed and handed it over to the individuals. When you look across the country, we've got the most successful model of land reform and land transfer. And so ultimately, here's what I want. I want Black South Africans, white South Africans, to be able to ultimately own land in their own rights. And if you can achieve that over a long period of time and show the capability of the state to do that, objectively speaking, compare one government versus another, I can assure you where the DA governs, there are more landowners than there are in other governments. And
then another issue quickly on diversity. I mean, you also say that you are committed to diversity, but would not enforce quotas. And I remember it created such controversy in the Democratic Alliance. Again, why don't you emphatically say what diversity looks like? Can you afford, can you implement diversity without paying attention to the numbers and the quotas? We'll debate the substance later, but can you not do that?
Of course you can. And that's a question of being able to say, if I wanted a list that consisted of both men and women, surely I can sit down, and if I looked at one list that said it only had 10 men and I wanted more women, I can set a target to say we're going to go and work hard to introduce more women into this list, and then set a target to say we'll incrementally over a period of time get to a particular point. When you begin to set a quota and say society has got 50% women and 50% men, and then you make it out like that, firstly you are imposing a particular will.
But not a quota that necessarily reflects that, but a quota that says, as this party, this is how many women we need, this is how many men we need. That's a quota. No. You're setting a particular target that will reflect diversity. You can
manipulate opportunity.
Are you uncomfortable
I'm not uncomfortable at all.
Diversity, and there's something called white privilege, we've got to fix it. Are you uncomfortable using those terms and fixing them?
I'm not uncomfortable at all. In fact, I'm much more aggressive at being able to say I want to address them. You can deal with equality of opportunity, but you can't deal with equality of outcome. Okay. And therefore, what's more crucial is that we've got to make sure that we're the voice of those who are left out. South Africans, at this point in time, South Africans who are included, who are on the inside track, are well looked after. Their interests are spoken about in Parliament. I'm more worried about the young person who's sitting in a rural community has no opportunity. The ones that are left out, that's the target we've got to fight for and include more people.
We've run out of time. I didn't ask you about life, SCD, and please stop sending us SMSs and calling us. Where do you get our numbers
I want you to turn out to vote.
That's the Democratic Alliance leader. Thank you very much for watching Unfiltered this week. Good night.
In a UN report, scientists say climate change is getting worse.
1/3 of our food sources for the population come out of the ocean.
We spoke to people who have been directly affected.